Hello, everybody. Good evening. We should be live. Give me a sec to make sure that everything is working. Uh, One sec. Okay. Chat's open. And yes. Okay. Good. Flawless. Um, Good evening. This is, I believe, I might have one more office hours on Tuesday, so this might be the second to last office hours, um, where you guys can get your questions in and you guys can figure out. We can talk about the final is, and if there are no questions on the final, this is sort of my I guess wrap up for some things in the class that some stories that I like to tell in class, but due to COVID, I wasn't able to tell, and I wanted to sort of combine together in one big office hours, one big chat. Um, so I'm probably going to be streaming for about an hour or so. Um, if you guys have questions, leave them in the chat. I have the chat open. It's probably a pretty fast way to get your questions answered. Um, in terms of class news, I have answered all the emails and I have graded all of the Eichmann papers. So those should be up. There's one up earlier today, a couple hours ago. So for the most part, those went very well. Some issues, but so far, no problems. Change the camera angle a little bit because today is Friday and we're getting funky with it. So I think what I'm going to do for the time being is I am going to jump in to our good old time wasting device, and that time wasting device is our friend, Mr. Football Manager. So I am going to try and narrate while all of this is happening. Let's quickly recap here before I get into the stories. Season has been going rather well. So we left off with the 1-1 draw with Kidderminster. The good news is we have only lost one game, and that was in a cup competition. But for the rest, we've had a pretty solid run of games. We have won quite a few. Couple of 1-1s and 0-0 draws. Our single loss knocked us out of the FA Cup, unfortunately, which is where I was kind of counting to make some money, but they don't always work out. In terms of squad news, trying to think if there's any news. Well, let's start off with Mr. McKengo here, who, if you remember in our last stream, we brought in to replace Mulhern, who was not playing enough on his loan and wanted to leave, and I was able to save money and get a good player. Well, better player than I thought he was going to be, because this is he's appeared in 5 league games, has scored once, but in all competitions between the cups and the league, he scored 6 goals already in like the month and a half that I've had him. So this has been a pretty solid option. We still have too many players up front. I still want to cut one, and I really want to get rid of Sean Touton here. Haven't had anyone come in for him yet. The other big news is that we made a sale, and it's a rather big one. We sold Jay Rollins, who was the club captain before I showed up. He was making a lot of money and was just not playing. He was just outclassed by Carvalho and Bars and all the players that I brought in, and was just not up to the level and was making a lot of money. The only problem is that he was a team leader in the dressing room. So if I go to dynamics and hierarchy, you'll see here no team leaders, no highly influential players. And this is probably because I brought a lot of newer players in. There are no players that have been here over a course of a few seasons. So the more I stick around, the more some of these players will like move up the ranks and will become more important to the game. In terms of scheduling, so we have a couple of games right now. I'm going to stream for an hour or so however many games we get through. And I guess as soon as the game starts, I'll start telling some stories. And again, I have the chat open right here, so get your questions in, and I will try to answer them as best I can. If you have questions about the final, questions about assignments, so on and so forth. So let's go look at the next match. So we're going to be playing Kirsten Ashton. I did promise we'd be coming out on January 1st. January 1st is officially when the transfer window starts in England, and there are a couple of players that I kind of need. I need cover for, if I go to tactics, I need cover for this position because right now Bars has played pretty much every single game, and that's a problem. The solution I have found roughly is to put in Mete, who is a striker, and you see like he doesn't really play well in that position, move him in this corner and then move Fage up to be a more proper wingback. But that's not ideal. That's not a long-term solution. That's definitely more of a short-term solution. So if I can find someone who can play that role, outstanding. But I could also just save my money and wait for the summer. Because speaking of the summer, we are actually solidly in the playoff spot. So if you remember last time, I believe we were either 5th or 6th. Our good form in the season has meant that we've gone all the way up to 2nd. It is really unlikely that we're going to catch York City, who, if we get through enough games, we might play today. But York City is pretty much out of reach. I have a question here already, and I'm going to tackle it as I multitask here. Tasneem would like to know if the works cited page will be counted as part of the 10 or will it be counted as extra? Well, this is sort of why I recommend using footnotes. Footnote for the final, at least, footnotes make a lot more sense. However, it depends on how many citations you're using. If you're using a lot of citations, footnotes can get a little bit unwieldy, and so it makes a little more sense to use bibliography. Generally speaking, no. Your 10 pages of content need to be 10 pages of content. That does not include your bibliography. So 10 full pages means 10 full pages of paper. And then in addition, you can add your bibliography at the end. I don't know if you guys are using the method using Word that I showed you, or you guys would prefer using footnotes. Again, it's entirely up to you. I don't really get in your way again because this is not an English class. So like, so long as you're citing and you're showing me a good faith effort to at least attempt to cite properly, I'm happy. So let's move into the match. Pretty much the same formation as we've been playing. You'll be wondering maybe what these green lines are. The game takes into consideration how long players have been playing with each other. And so, for example, Carvalho and Penny have basically been playing on the right side of the pitch all season. And so they've started to form a partnership. Dunn and Aresti have been playing with each other alongside each other for about a month, and they're getting a good understanding with each other. I would love to keep Dunn next year. I'm going to try to maybe renew his loan. Actually, let me see if I can do that now. Yeah, no. I need to wait at least a couple more weeks into the transfer window, but I'm going to try to do that for next season. And Arthur and Mesbah are also getting a pretty solid partnership. We're going to start with Mekengo up front. I'm going to give him some faith, but we also have Alassane Mete on the bench. I'm trying to think if there are any changes I would like to make here. Yeah, actually I do. I would like to take Garner off and bring in Middleton, because Middleton can play both right back and center back, and it's good to have that cover on the bench. And I think I'll take Heslop out as well, and I'm going to put in Tom Platt. Okay, this is my formation. Let's click Submit Team, and We take the second question, also from Tasneem, and just to make sure, you want us to state the questions before writing the answer. Is there any amount of quotes you prefer? So let me take those in order. You definitely should include the questions, and this is not because I need to particularly know which questions, because a lot of the questions are similar or are covering similar topics, or dealing with similar issues, but from different perspectives based on the historical things that we've looked at in class. So it's not, um, for my own sanity, just please include the question in bold. Like the way you would do with a paper with your title, just copy paste the question and use that as your title. It's just easier for everyone involved. I think for the quotes, it depends on how you're tackling the question. There's not going to be a set answer because not everyone's going to be writing their questions in the same way. If you're doing short answer questions, I guess maybe one citation, two citations. No, sorry, maybe one citation, but not necessarily like an in-text citation, not like a direct quote, more like, based on what I've read here, footnote, here it is. You can say yada, 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 yada. If you're doing a paper, like if you're taking, let's say, the question on Eichmann, right? Comparing, there's a question, I believe, comparing the Eichmann trial to the trial in Darkness at Noon. That's a longer question. And if you wanted to treat that as a 5-6 page paper, well, then the general rule is two quotes per paragraph. That's a general rule for all papers across your classes. It's a solid rule of thumb to follow, and that's one that I've used personally as a student. Each of your paragraph should be roughly, if it's double spaced, approximately 3/4 of a page. Again, rule of thumb, not perfect, not ideal. You can, some paragraphs have 3 quotes, some paragraphs have 1 quote. But as a rule of thumb, it's always better to have approximately 2 quotes per paragraph and have each paragraph be approximately 3/4 of a page. That's just a general formatting trick that I use, but again, it's not a hard and fast rule. Keep them coming. If you have questions on the final, I'm here for an hour. I'm here to answer all your questions. I'm just shooting this shit. You guys can join me, and if you don't care, you can just watch this with me. So we have started the game off rather well, actually. They have not had a single shot on target, which of course means that I will just jinxed myself. But we've had a couple of shots early, but they've both gone off out over the crossbar. I guess while we wait for something, as soon as there's something interesting to happen, something interesting happens. I guess while we wait for something interesting to happen, I'll get into my first story. And I like to tell the story at the end of my World War I class because I am fascinated by the sort of three-way connection between politics, history, and pop culture. And one of my favorite, as we know, explore, one of my favorite stories is of a young officer who goes to fight in World War I. And he's a British officer, and he goes through many of the experiences that we've looked at about World War I in this class, whether it be in the story of Hitler and Max coming home from World War I in Max, or if you took part in the extra credit, or you just chose to watch it because I recommended it, 1917, or in the segments of All Quiet on the Western Front, or in Storm of Steel. We've looked at World War I a lot. And one recurring theme in all of these works is sort of an inability of these people to talk about what they've experienced, right? One of the most heartbreaking parts of All Quiet on the Western Front, which is not in the part that we read, but is in the recap that was in the modules, is pause, come on, score it. Yes, I am a tactical genius. Because I brought Dunn in, and Makengo is a good buy. I rest my case. I am good at this game. Anyway, we said that one thing that is in common with all of these stories is this inability to tell people close to you what you're going through. We see it in Max, right? Max can't relate to his family anymore because he's been through something so traumatic that it's difficult for him to relate to his family, essentially. Um, this happens to this young British officer. Um, but this young British officer, he goes home and he tells his friends, and his friends don't believe him. They say, "How can this be true? How can this possibly be an accurate representation of what war is today?" But this young man loves mythology, loves English literature. He spent his young adult life, reading things like Beowulf, uh, reading the stories of King Arthur's court, reading the myths and legends of the Vikings and the Saxons, and all of these things that a young British boy in the early 1900s learned about. And he says, okay, if people won't understand the story directly, the story I'm trying to tell people, what if I tell it indirectly? What if I take all of these things that I love and I put it in a story, but the themes of that story will be the themes of World War One? And now some of you may have guessed who I am talking about, but if someone wants to take a stab in chat, I'm going to pause for about 30 seconds and see if someone gets it. Let's see. Let me watch the game and see if someone knows what I'm talking about. I see no chats, and so answer is a young officer named John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. And the book that he writes is The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is, in fact, an allegory for World War One, right? But it's told through the lens of these things that Tolkien grew up with, these things that Tolkien loved as a child. But if you actually, sit back and you think of the themes of the story, the story is about PTSD, and it's not a coincidence that the enemies in Lord of the Rings use things like industry, right, against their more naturalistic and peaceful good guys. Tolkien is a World War One vet, and we score again. Is a World War One vet, and he writes the Lord of the Rings as an outlet for what he's feeling coming back from World War One, but he can't do it normally because no one will believe him if he tells the story normally. So he has to tell the story abnormally. As we nearly score again, we need to put this match to bed. And the way he tells the story abnormally is through the Lord of the Rings, the lens of the Lord of the Rings. And the story, if this makes you want to rewatch the movies tonight, has a completely different edge to it, because the enemy is industry, the enemy is modernity, is the dirtiness of war that is created in a post-industrial revolution age. That's what he's railing against. That's what he's angry about. It's mass production, and it's a fascinating look at the psyche of vets coming back from World War One. I love this story because what the story shows is that you can tell historical fact through the use of fiction if you understand that fiction to be allegory. I'm going to jump into the dressing room, take a quick look at the stats here. We've played very well. I'm rather pleased. So let's head over into the dressing room. We're still only winning 1-0, and that's a problem. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say assertively, not to get complacent. Things can turn around very quickly in soccer. Keep focused. Which most people enjoyed except for Lewis Dunn, but he'll get over it. So let's start the second half. So yeah, the story of Tolkien and World War One is a fascinating story, and it recontextualizes the whole sort of body of work that sort of snowballed out of control. As a similar story that I have is not from World War One, but from World War Two. So World War Two. We often associate the defining moment in the Allied victory in World War II to be D-Day, the landing in Normandy. And that is partially correct. That's not incorrect. But that is not the whole picture. Because, of course, anyone who knows anything about World War II will know that prior to Normandy comes the landing in Sicily, in Italy, right? And the Italian campaign. Now, here's the thing. In 1943, Sicily is one of the most heavily defended islands in Europe. Of all of the places in Europe, the place that Churchill calls the soft underbelly of Europe in a sort of snide way of dissing the Italians. Churchill recognizes the strategic importance of Sicily, both because Sicily is centrally located in the Mediterranean. So if you take Sicily, you can monopolize the shipping lanes all throughout the Mediterranean, and also because Sicily is a conduit by which you can enter Italy, and if you can get through Italy, you can enter Germany from the south. The Germans also know this, which is why they put, and I believe this is the technical term, hella soldiers in Sicily, because the Germans, not stupid. And so, here's the story. Officers in a submarine, the British Navy, are carrying with them a VIP. This VIP is, and I want to get the title right, so give me just 1 second here. The title of this man is Personal Assistant to the Director of Naval Intelligence. That's the name of the guy. VIP, important person. And they're carrying this young man to the coast of Spain. And this young man has with him no belongings, no nothing. But he has with him a barrel. And the soldiers on this, the naval officers on this submarine are instructed not to open the barrel until they get to the coast of Spain. In which case, in the middle of the night, the submarine emerges off the coast of, I believe it's Huelva. I'm not quite sure where that is in Spain. I'm not going to lie to you. But if you're in front of a computer, which I'm assuming you are, go Google it. The submarine emerges out from the water. And personal assistant to the Director of Naval Intelligence comes up on top of the submarine, has the soldiers carry the barrel, and then tells everyone but the senior officials of the submarine to go below deck, leaving only him and 2-3 men on the top of the submarine. He then instructs the men to open the barrel. Now you might be thinking, very end of Seven, the movie, what's in the box? Well, in the barrel, there is a body. And swearing them to secrecy, these officers lift the body out of the barrel and dump him into the ocean. After which, the submarine vanishes into the night. Now you might be asking, why in the world would they do this? Well, the body is found by a fisherman in Huelva, who in his daily catch finds tangled in his net The body of a young officer, I believe his name is William Martin. Let me double check that name for you. I know the last name is Martin, but the first name is, oh yeah, William Martin. I'm correct. William Martin, active major. And William Martin has handcuffed to his wrist a briefcase. You might be asking, well, what's in the briefcase? Well, the briefcase contains a wide variety of personal effects, letters from a girl back home, an overdraft statement from Lloyd's Bank, London, a letter from his father, and a sealed envelope addressed to Winston Churchill. Now, the envelope contains secret Allied plans to invade Spain, Sardinia, and Greece. The Allies had just finished up their campaign in North Africa and the Sahara, and this plan outlines a secret Allied plan to invade Europe through Spain, passing through Spain, Sardinia, and Greece. The Spanish open up the briefcase, they read the letter, and the head of the Spanish government, Francisco Franco, who is technically neutral in the war. Oh, we just scored again. Again, another one of my signings. I will take full credit for this. A little goalkeeper. Anyway, I won't complain. As I was saying, Francisco Franco, the dictator, fascist dictator of Spain, technically neutral, but, you know, homies with Hitler. Make sure that this information reaches the Reich. After which, the body of acting Major William Martin, the contents of his briefcase, the letter, are resealed and returned to the British. As soon as the body is returned to the British, a telegram reaches Winston Churchill. The telegram reads as follows: Mincemeat, swallowed, hook, rod, line, and sinker. As you may have guessed, this was a trap. You see, acting Major William Martin did not exist. The body was not of acting Major William Martin. The name William Martin is chosen because it is the most generic name that could be thought of. And so the understanding is that when the Spanish or the German went to check in on if there was such a person as acting Major William Martin, they would find several because it's a common name. And inside the letter, there was contained a single black eyelash. The understanding is that if the Spanish have opened the letter, the eyelash will be gone. If the Spanish don't open the letter, the eyelash will still be there, and therefore showing whether or not the bait has been taken. But of course, it gets deeper than that, because in order to set the bait, you need a body. I am just going to pause the story real quick to remark that we won 2-0, and I will congratulate my players on a game well done. And we're just going to keep continuing forward as I talk. In order to set the bait, you need a body. While this plan is being hatched, a Welsh homeless person collapses in the streets of London. His name is, and again, I'm going to pull up the page here because I want to make sure I get it right. It's a Welsh name, that's why. Glyndwr Michael, and Glyndwr is spelled without vowels. GlynDWR. No vowels. I'm guessing it's Glyndwr. Michael. Where Michael was staying in an abandoned factory that had been shelled during the war and had gotten so hungry that he had mistakenly eaten rat poison and had died alone, no family that we know of, no friends that we know of. And when the coroner discovers this, he says, well, this is a intact enough body that you can use for this. Because the man is shot, if the man dies in a car accident, there's going to be external damage to the tissue, to the body, and it's going to be obvious that this is a plant. Poison, different story. So, Glenroy Michael is taken to the coroner. Post-mortem, he is showered, shaved, and they begin to create this fake identity because they want to make sure that there's a paper trail for all of the evidence they were planting on this person. They want to make this guy look credible. So they go to Lloyd's Bank. They open a bank account in this fake man's name, and they intentionally overdraw it to create a real overdraft letter from Lloyd's Bank. The girlfriend, whose picture he has, was actually an undersecretary at the Department of at Naval Intelligence in the UK, who agreed to pose for the picture. And of course, the letter to his father is fake. For good measure, there's a gamble that somehow works when you roll a 10 for luck and a 0 for charisma. They include on his person, under his clothes, a Roman Catholic cross, because they think that the Spanish, being themselves Roman Catholics, will be hesitant to perform a full autopsy. Bear in mind, this 1940s, on a member of their own faith. And this is, in fact, correct. They don't perform a full autopsy. In addition, they go to the local coroner, and the coroner says, well, how do you want to make this guy look to die? What do you want to make it look like? And Churchill's office says, well, we want to make it look like he died in a plane crash. Well, it turns out this is easier than you think, because most people who die in plane crashes over the sea die of the shock, not of drowning. And so they don't even need to make him look like he's a drowning victim. They literally just need to dump the body. And the idea is that unless you go digging, it will appear that this person died of shock. And that's what happens. They dump the body in. And almost a couple weeks later, soldiers leave Sicily and are stationed in Sardinia, off the coast of Spain, and Greece. The invasion of Sicily can begin. This is Operation Mincemeat. It is the craziest story that I have ever heard. It can only be beaten by one story, which I'm about to tell soon. But I'm not done. I'm not finished. Because that junior undersecretary who got on the submarine and dumped the body and was working for personal assistant to the Secretary of Naval Intelligence, is a young, I want to make sure I get his title right, Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming, who after the war would gather together his experiences in naval intelligence and would write James Bond, Casino Royale. Yep. Turns out that the author of the most famous spy in history was actually somewhat of a spy himself. I love this story because this story has everything. It's got spies, it's got ingenuity, it's got mystery. It's one of my favorite history stories. It's really, really good. But it is topped by the story of, that one again, let me make sure I get the name right, Joshua Abraham Norton, Emperor of these United States. Now you might be thinking, wait, what? Emperor of the United States? Hold up, pause. How is that possible? What are you talking about? There is no way that there is such a thing as Emperor of the United States. Well, let me tell you a story. Joshua Abraham Norton was born in London in, I believe, before the Civil War. I think it's like 1830 or something. And his family bounces around a couple of different places around the world. I believe he spends a couple years in South Africa. And then he moves to San Francisco, California. Now, if you've heard the famous saying about the gold rush, it's that the men who got rich in the gold rush were not the ones digging for gold. It was those who were selling the shovels. Well, Joshua Abraham Norton was like a pioneer of this mentality. Joshua Abraham Norton is one of America's first West Coast millionaires because Abraham Norton for the time is extremely wealthy. He has like 40 grand in the mid 1800s, which is like a lot of money. It is unclear when he enlists in fighting in the Civil War, only that he does. And a lot of this story happens post-retirement. And so this is a weird period in American history. This is an era in the South that we would call Reconstruction. But out West, you have different issues. A lot of these men had gone out West seeking gold as part of the gold rush. And when that gold did not materialize, they did not have the funds to go back home. And so they essentially became transplants to California. This is how California gets started. It also means that labor and work is hard to find. This leads to things like, for example, the Chinese Exclusion Act and all of these sort of racist policies towards Asian Americans. Well, at the time, they were fully Asians, fully, non-citizens. And there was a lot of violence in the streets and a lot of sort of overt racism towards these people. And it's not clear what happens. But during this period, a famine strikes China. And because of this famine, the government of China decides to restrict all exports of rice from China in order to feed their population. This causes the price of rice, rhyme not intended, in San Francisco to skyrocket because San Francisco got most of their rice for eating from China. Joshua Abraham Norton is looking for his next investment, and what he finds is this story that's given to him from a friend about the last ship coming up from Peru, carrying the last shipment of Peruvian rice. It's already at an inflated price, but Norton says, well, if I buy all of it, then I corner the market, I can charge what I want, and I'll be a monopoly. So he sinks. He owns $40,000, 30,000 of those 40, he sinks into this investment. It's a very risky investment. And at first, it would seem to pay off. But a week later, 2 more ships carrying Peruvian rice enter the port of San Francisco, causing Mr. Norton's investment to practically disappear overnight. Because now this rice that he's bought at an extremely inflated price is now worthless because there's plenty of it. Norton goes from millionaire, one of the richest men in San Francisco, to homeless in the course of about a month. And Norton disappears from the map for a couple years. But as racial tensions rise up again, flare up again, there is one of San Francisco's first race riots, and it's come to a family of Chinese Americans that have moved into the city in San Francisco, and a lot of out of work, moderately drunk um, white laborers began attacking this family. And out of an alley, dressed in a tattered Union Blue Army waistcoat, comes Norton. Has a cane and a sword. He's sort of outlandish, a man out of time almost. And he gets between the crowd and the family that is, hugging each other, scared for their lives. And he stops them. The crowd goes silent. And standing between them, he orders them all to go home and then begins to recite a prayer. Now, what's shocking about this is that the men listen. I'm going to pause my story because I have a question here from Rosa. Rosa says, "Hi, Prof. I have a question. Do we do both a footnote and a bibliography, or is it just one of them? And do you want a cover page?" So cover page, no. Let's start with that. I don't need a cover page. Just include at the top of your thing like your name, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, look, you can include a cover page, but that's not included in your 10 pages. All right. So if you're including a cover page, then your thing is 11 pages. Don't try to get around it that way. As for footnotes and bibliography, a footnote replaces your bibliography, right? Because think about it conceptually. If you're using footnotes, right? If you're replacing your in-text citation with footnotes, this makes your bibliography sort of redundant because all of the things that you're quoting, your full citations, instead of being at the end of your document in the bibliography, are just at the bottom of each page in which you cited them. So it's sort of redundant. The only instance where you would use both is with a research paper, because in a research paper, you will have read more things than you will have physically quoted or referenced in your work. And if you wanted to get credit for those things, you would also include a bibliography. But for this assignment, I mean, unless you really want to go above and beyond, but, for the record, I am not requiring you to do this, either or. My personal recommendation is footnotes because, from a practical standpoint, footnotes save you from writing as much. The more quotes you use, the more footnotes you use, the more space it chews up at the bottom of the page, the less you have to write, right? Roll safe meme. But also, like, it's cleaner for me and it's easier for me. Once upon a time I would print these out and I would, read them paper. And so it didn't make a lot of difference for me, footnotes or bibliography. But now that I'm reading things digitally, especially now, but I've been doing this for a couple of years, I'm reading things digitally. Not to get off topic here, bibliographies are like the biggest pain in my ass, because a bibliography is, for lack of a better word, looking at your quote, scrolling to the end of the document, finding citation done properly, then scrolling back up and finding my spot again. It's extremely annoying. Anyway, so personal preferences is footnotes, but again, I do not require that from you. I want to make that abundantly clear. You do whatever you're most comfortable with. So getting back to the story, why did these men listen? Because this was Emperor Norton, Emperor of these United States. Again, with that, what do I mean? Well, a couple of months before this, Norton walks into the offices of the San Francisco Daily Evening Bulletin and walks right up to the editor and says, "I would like you to publish this." And he hands him a letter. And the letter reads as follows. I have the quote right here. I picked it up intentionally so you guys could hear it. He says, At the request of a large majority of citizens of these United States, I, Joshua Abraham Norton, formerly of Algoa Bay and the Cape of Good Hope, and now for these past 9 years and 10 months, citizen of these United States of San Francisco, California, declare and proclaim myself Emperor of these United States. And in virtue of the authority thereby in me vested, order and direct the representatives of the different states of the Union to assemble in this city on the first day of February next. He declares himself emperor. Now, the normal reaction to this is to say, okay, buddy, all right, good for you. Kick the guy out, put the letter in the crank files. But the editors of the newspaper keep reading the letter, and they just think it's really funny. We can talk about the ethics of laughing at Joshua Abraham Norton at the end of this story. But clearly this guy suffered a mental breakdown from going from millionaire to homeless person, and they published the letter. It's the craziest thing. There is no reason for these men to publish this letter, right? There's no rationale that this newspaper had for publishing Joshua Abraham Norton's letter declaring himself Emperor of the United States. But they do. And what's interesting here, what's fascinating here is that the citizens of San Francisco, they read this letter and they kind of love it. They kind of they're saying, yeah, all right, I can roll with this. And just like that, the whole city sort of goes along with it. And so as Emperor Norton is, they call him Emperor Norton. As he rolls down the street, people salute him. People in restaurants, they give him discounts. The boarding house that he stays in basically says, you can stay here practically for free so long as I can use you on my advertising materials. Tailors from all over the city say, oh no, please, let me dress you, Emperor Norton. I will give you the best clothes that we have to offer so long as I can say that I dress the emperor. And this guy just starts rolling around the city of San Francisco in the late 1800s, acting like the Emperor of the United States. I find this story fascinating because if we really sort of think about it, what we're looking at is one of the first recorded incidences, historically recorded incidences of what we would now refer to as a meme, right? It's a joke that everyone in the city was aware of and familiar with and got on board with. But then they take it a step further because this rookie police officer, right, gets in on the force and has no idea who this guy is, right? And one night sees this guy walking around the street, approaches him, and essentially arrests him for vagrancy, right, for loitering. And then after interviewing him, also arrests him, charges him for lunacy, and wants him sent to an asylum to get treatment. During the trial, the city riots. The city goes to the police station and essentially, think like mobs not too dissimilar to what's going on in places like Michigan right now, right? Or these crazy angry people demanding that Emperor Norton be released and that apology be given to this man. And the crazy thing is, the police officers comply. The officers do it. There exists a formal document issued by the police department of San Francisco issuing a formal apology to Joshua Abraham Norton, Emperor of these United States. It's insanity, right? It's crazy. There is no rhyme or reason why this should be happening. But it gets worse because Norton takes it on his head to say, okay, well, I have the newspaper. I have these people in the city that like me. I'm going to start writing laws. And so he does. His first law is rather popular in that he dissolves Congress for being a noxious institution, because years change, but some things don't. Um, he he orders the construction of, and that's like one of the funnier one. He also abolishes both the Democratic and Republican parties. Let me see if I can get if I can find the quotes of the decrees that he publishes in the San Francisco Herald. Yes. So if you go to wikiquote.org and you search Emperor Norton, you'll find all of these decrees, and they're wild. So, for example, 13th of August, 1869, he writes, being desirous of allaying the dissensions of party strife existing within my realm, I do hereby dissolve and abolish the Democratic and Republican parties, and hereby do decree the imprisonment of no more than 10, but no less than 5 years to all persons leading to any violation of this decree. So not only are the parties abolished, but anyone who is a member of the party, like high-ranking officials in the party, get sent to prison for 6 years. It's crazy. And you might be thinking, okay, but what's the point of this? The point is that the line between joke and non-joke starts to get fuzzy and starts to get a little hazy. So, like, yeah, it's funny when he abolishes Congress and he says, "Oh yeah, ha ha ha, we're getting rid of Congress. Aren't we good, funny people?" But what happens when he proclaims, for example, that a suspension bridge should be built between the cities of San Francisco and Oakland over the Bay of San Francisco? And a couple of years later, city officials begin planning that bridge. We call that bridge today, by the way, the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. The inventor of the Golden Gate Bridge is no government official of San Francisco. It's fucking Joshua Abraham Norton, Emperor of the United States, is the first one to think, hey, a bridge would be good here. He starts writing foreign leaders. He starts writing to foreign leaders all over the world. And some of those leaders answer back. Very famously, he becomes really good friends with the last king of Hawaii, the Kingdom of Hawaii, Emperor Kamehameha, to the point that Emperor Kamehameha refused to deal with U.S. diplomats in the State Department, asking only to speak to Emperor Norton. And so, hence the question. If this guy calls himself emperor, and then people go along with it and start listening to his commands, when he writes laws, people start doing those things. When he conducts international diplomacy on behalf of the United States, at what point does he actually become the emperor of the United States? At what point is this no longer a joke and actually a serious part of the United States policy? I say this because, look, if he's doing all of these things on behalf of the United States, we have to ask this question, right? Because, what do we understand a government to do? Enact laws, engage in foreign policy, and protect its citizens. Emperor Norton does all three of those things. And so, do we, on some level, end up having an emperor of these United States? I don't know. I'm not going to be the one to say that. I don't know what I'm doing here. Parentheses. I'm trying something new. I don't know why I'm trying something new. I am only trying something new to say that I'm trying something new. But I don't know. This seems overly risky. But we're at home. We're against Darlington. I think we'll be fine. Um, famous last words, we'll be fine, and I get blown out. Well, we'll see what happens. I also need to rest players, so I'm gonna have to change formation anyway. Woof at those star ratings. But anyway, yeah, I just find that story to be so interesting because, again, like, where's the line? where does the line end between this just being a joke, this being like history's first recorded meme, and people taking it way too far, and people like actually listening to the things that Norton says? I just find this story to be so interesting. I'm trying to think if I have some other ones. I guess I could tell my Nixon stories. The Nixon stories are more short and more humorous than anything. I usually talk about these in class. Nixon is one of the most unintentionally hilarious candidates that America has ever produced for president. And the reason is that Nixon, lack of a better word, really wants to be president. Like, he runs for president 3 times. First as Eisenhower's VP, and then as his own man. And what's fascinating about Nixon is, oh, hold up, let's watch the shot. Wait, I got all excited. I thought you were gonna score it. You let me down. You let me down, Knowles. Anyway, offside? Offside. Okay. We're good. We got an offside for us. We got an offside against us. Oh, I don't know about that. I think that was good, actually. I think that was a legit one. That was not offside. Anyway, so the first story about Nixon that I love is a classic of poli-sci classes. It's from the 1960 election. And so Nixon, let's be candid, is not what we would call a good-looking man. Right? Nixon is, I'm sure, has many qualities, but his looks are not amongst them. Which means Nixon, next to Kennedy, feels very self-conscious. But this is also 1960. It's the era of television for the first time. So, this means that 1960 has the first televised presidential debate. Now, this is hosted by ABC Studios. Unlike a presidential debate today, which is held in a university hall and you have the cameras, essentially the network brings the studio to the venue. At the time, this was more of a question and answer format, no public, no audience in the studio with the 2 candidates. So both of them show up at New York City in ABC Studios at the same time. Kennedy and Nixon walk in. It's a little awkward because they're running against each other. I'll get to the question in a second. Let me just finish the story. And so they walk into the studio at the same time. And a young producer comes up to them and says, "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to ABC. You will be going live on the air in about an hour. Would you like makeup?" And Kennedy immediately says no. And Nixon, who doesn't want to seem effeminate next to his better-looking counterpart, also, gruffly says, "Oh, no, I don't want makeup. No, thank you." Of course, as soon as Nixon turns and leaves, Kennedy makes a U-turn, goes back to the producer and says, "Hey, give me all the makeup. I want all of it." And so, remember, this is black and white television. Nixon, in person, looks ridiculous. Kennedy looks ridiculous in person. Kennedy is coated with like enough foundation to put Beyonce to shame, right? Just covered in foundation, covered in, like, looks like a clown, like, again, like, looks like I'm trying to think of analogies here. Looks like uh, a James Charles makeup tutorial on crystal meth, like, covered. It's ridiculous. But under the bright, white hot studio lights of ABC Studios during the debate, Kennedy has so much foundation on him that he doesn't break a sweat, that it looks perfect, flawless to the American public. Nixon, on the other hand, who, again, I would remind you, went for no makeup at all, looks pale, sweaty, greasy, separate, like, who's that? All right, here's a shout. No, looks like he just gone out of a 5 mile hike. So sweaty and greasy and, like, disgusting. And partially because that's how he looks, right? And which is why political scientists find this fascinating. When people are polled later on, it is found that if you had watched the debate on television, overwhelmingly, it's not close, like overwhelmingly, to a margin of like 85 to 15, people say Kennedy won the debate. But if you listen to the debate via radio, the opposite is true. And Nixon wins the debate because this is the first real instance of television shaping our political reality. It's something that is remarkably prescient today, especially. Again, I find that story just to be so a little dumb. It's a little stupid, but I just find it fascinating because it reveals a lot about both men, I feel. So I want to answer this question. Always the Rock. I'm not sure who this is from my classes, but I assume you're in my classes because you're asking a final question. Asks, sorry if you've already answered this 1,000 times, but I'm just tuning in now while you're available. Do you want a works cited and do you want a cover page, abstract included? Maybe, absolutely not. So I definitely don't need an abstract. Number one, because unless you're writing a 10-page paper, you're going to have like 5 to 10 different abstracts, right? Like abstract is completely non-required. Works cited, I definitely need some form of citation. Now, whether you decide to use footnotes or whether you decide to use a works cited or a bibliography is entirely up to you. I would refer you to the video that I made Sunday night, again live, showing how to do citation with Word. But again, that citation style is entirely up to you, whether you choose to use footnotes or you choose to use a bibliography with Word. Entirely up to you. Whatever you want to use, whatever you're more comfortable with is fine. The only thing that I ask is that you use Chicago format instead of MLA. That's my only request. Chicago or APA, but APA is difficult. Chicago is a lot easier. Like, significantly easier. Just use Chicago. Cover page, I don't require one. It doesn't hurt. Like if you include a cover page, I'm not going to be like, oh, he included a cover page, points off. That said, if you use a cover page and you include that in your 10 pages, yes, I am going to take points off, right? So like cover page, then you write your 10 pages, and then if you're using one, then you include your works cited. I hope that makes sense. I'm doing these exactly to answer questions like this. So I said I would be streaming for about an hour, and I have been, but I'm getting questions, so I think I'll stay on for another like 45 minutes, 30 minutes, and if I'm getting more questions, I'm happy to answer them. That's why I'm doing these. I will probably do another one on Tuesday. Again, sort of looking at this at this at the questions of the file. I mentioned this at the start of the stream, but I recognize that not all of you were here for the start of the stream. The Eichmann grades went up earlier today. I finished grading the last couple that I had. I mentioned last time. Those got finished this afternoon. Those grades went up earlier today. So if you check your grade book, you should now see your sorry, mind blank, your Eichmann grade. For the extra credit, a couple of you emailed me, and I checked the attendance for the extra credit, and you guys never came to any of the Zoom calls. And I'm sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place here, because ideally I would like to give everyone credit for the work that they did. But of course, that means that those points have to come from somewhere. I really don't want to make the extra credit 15 points or 14 points or however much it is, because then that's skewing the class way too much, way too much. 10 points is already a lot in terms of a grade. So what I'm thinking is, and I'll ask for your input on this. What I don't want to do is I don't want to just open up the assignment to everyone, right? Because that's not fair to the people who came to every single Zoom session about the movies, thinking that that's how they would have to do this assignment, right? That's not fair. They put time and they put effort in, and they deserve to be rewarded for that. But I also want to give grades to people who submitted extra credit papers without coming to any of the lectures, right? And so what I'm thinking is keeping the assignment 10 points, but making the paper version of the assignment 6 points, and then making attendance to the Zoom calls, of which there were 4, 1 point each. And so that would be in total 10 points. Let me know if you guys are cool with that. I'm trying to balance this out. I feel like that's sort of a happy medium that makes everyone happy. So if you wrote an extra credit paper, even though you weren't able to come to these Zoom calls, you'll still get extra credit. However, if you came to every Zoom call, you will get extra credit. You will just get more of it. If you guys are cool with that, let me know in the chat or let me know via email. That's sort of where my head's at. I'm looking to finalize most of the grades as much as I can by Sunday, and so I'm going to have to make a decision on this by Sunday, essentially, when I start submitting these grades to the grade book at least. So that should be that's what's on my mind. If there are no other questions for the final, which I don't see any, I am going to. I guess I'll tell another Nixon story. I have a couple. It's a shorter story as well. All my Nixon stories are rather short, but they're kind of funny, because again, Nixon tries so hard, and it's so funny that he's trying this hard. Have you ever wondered, when you see on the news presidential candidates as they're walking to their motorcade? Come on, you gotta score that, dude. You gotta score that. Hell, I could have scored that. Anyway, you ever wondered why when you are watching the news and you see a presidential candidate run toward, how did I score this? All right. While I try to figure this out, let me look at it, because I know I got a question. You can sound dumb, but it's defined on 6 or the 8th, because Canvas says the 8th, and I know syllabus says the 6th. Huh. Yeah, I had another student email. I couldn't really see this in my, keeper done goofed. I'm not going to complain because I got a score there, but feels bad. 6 or the 8th. I believe the answer is the 6th, right? Like I believe it's supposed to be next Wednesday, because then my grades are due on Friday. So that might have been a mistake on my part, where like I accidentally gave this might actually be what happened. I might have accidentally plugged in my due date for grades instead of your due date for grades, which is a big oops on my part. No, the correct due date is the 6th, Wednesday, because I need definitely because I need those 2 days to get it done. So thank you, because I had another student email me about this today, and I completely slipped my mind. Yeah, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Correct date is the syllabus date, not the Canvas date. And that's true generally speaking. Not if you're ever in a class with me in the future as well, always go by the syllabus, because I always write the syllabus before I make the Canvas, right? So if that's a mistake on my part. I apologize. We're going to score that again. We are not going to score that again. So anyway, Nixon's story. So Nixon is the reason why every time you watch a presidential candidate run to the, go to the motorcade, you see this Secret Service agent, Usain Bolt their way, and I just scored again, past the candidate to open the door for them. Now, why is that? Same election as the first story, the debate story. Nixon, it's a weird time for cars. Let's start with that. 1960 is the era in which we're trying to decide which directions car doors should open. Because as you know, right now, if you open your car door, it opens, I guess, like if this is the front, remote, this is the front of your car door opens like this. Back in the day, if you've ever seen an old vintage car, you'll know that they open the opposite way. They open backwards. And 1960s was right around the time they're trying to figure this out. And Nixon's in a hurry, and Nixon goes to this motorcade and goes to open his own door. And as you may have guessed, what happens? Nixon opens the door to his own car, and the door opens the wrong way. Doesn't open the way he's expecting it. And it hits his kneecap in the exact right way, and it shatters his kneecap. Nixon shatters his kneecap opening a door to a car, which, immediately on its face, I have many questions. I guess the first one being, how hard were you opening this door? But apparently, I guess it's like the sharp edge of the door frame hits his knee in just the right way that it shatters his kneecap. Now, let's say you shatter your kneecap. What is your first destination? In spite of what's going on now. You shatter your kneecap, where do you go? Destination 1. You go to the hospital, right? Because you're a sane person. Richard Nixon is many things, but he's not a quitter. And Nixon had a speaking engagement. So, as you may have guessed, Nixon gets in his car, puts an ice pack on his shattered knee, gets to his location, is helped out of the car, hobbles to the stage, and in severe, if he doesn't clench his teeth, he's going to scream pain, gives the speech, and he sounds angry, but he's not angry. He's just in severe pain, right? Because he's shattered his kneecap. And he gives the entire speech, the entire 30-minute speech with a shattered kneecap, and then goes to the hospital. To which the doctors take one look at the knee, and I believe I'm paraphrasing here, but they say, "You idiot, you've messed up your knee practically permanently. We need to do reconstructive surgery to put all the pieces of your kneecap back where they were. You're going to be stuck in the hospital for a month." And so Nixon is stuck in the hospital for a month in the middle of campaign season. And it's kind of crazy because Kennedy is out on the campaign trail and Nixon is giving interviews from his hospital bed. with like, you know, like in Looney Tunes or like old school cartoons when you break your leg and you have your knee, your leg propped up. Yeah, that's what it's like. It's surreal. It is. There is no reason for this to have happened, but it's Richard Nixon, and so it happened. Um, I do have one last Nixon story, but the story is not PG-13, so I'm hesitant to mention it live on YouTube. Um, all that I would ask, you can go look it up for yourself, is just do yourself a favor. If you have some free time and you want to laugh from a completely real campaign button made by Richard Nixon in 1956 that he's running for vice president, um, just maybe Google Richard Nixon 1956 campaign button. I swear it's real. I swear it's not a joke. You can still find them in. I actually found one in, of all places, an antique store in Salem, Massachusetts, when I went to visit Boston a couple months ago. But yeah, that's a. I'm not going to say what the button says, only to assure you that it's a real campaign button. It's real. So a fully functioning adult vetted what was on that on that button, and okayed it. Anyway, I guess full-time pep talk to the players. Very nice victory. Well done. So far, 2 for 2. It's 7:15 now. How about this? Instead of giving you guys a hard time limit, I'm going to play one more game with you guys, answer as many questions that you guys might have, tell some more history stories while I'm doing it, and after the game with York, if I don't have any more questions, I think I'll call it a day. I was eyeing Tuesday for a similar one, although with the deadline being the 6th, that might be coming a little close. So I might do one maybe Sunday night or Monday after lecture. I'm not sure. You guys tell me if these are helpful. If you're having a spur of the moment question on the final and you just want something answered real quick and you see me live, this is probably like just the easiest way to get that done. I cannot get this wrong. So yeah, and if you guys want me to do something else while I'm passing the time, that's perfectly fine too. You just tell me what you guys are interested in, and I'll take a look at it. I guess because I have no more questions, and I'm kind of out of history stories. I told 5 already. I'm trying to think, what history stories do I tell? Okay, I have one. Although this one's a little more depressing than anything. Which is why I probably should have started with this one as opposed and ended with my funny stories. But okay, here goes. So, as you guys remember, the Weimar Republic, the government in Germany between wars, World War I and World War II, gets its name from the city of Weimar. And Weimar, we didn't really talk about the city of Weimar, but Weimar is this sort of cultural hub of Germany. If you needed an analogy to what Weimar represents to Germany, it's a little bit like New Orleans is to the United States, where it's like, when I say cultural hub, I don't necessarily mean like actors live there, but it's more like literary people, like a literary hub of the United States. Weimar is to Germany, right? So a lot of famous German poets are from Weimar, or they lived in Weimar, and it's this very sort of like stereotypical German town. It's got that sort of unique style of house with the white and the brown wood. It's got beer houses. It's very German, and a lot of artists live here. It's got cobbled streets. It is when you think Germantown, chances are you're thinking of Weimar. Now, here's the thing. Weimar has this hill, and it's the most famous part of the city. And it has this hill overlooking the old town. And on top of this hill, there is a singular oak tree that's been there forever. And the German poet Goethe would famously sit under this tree and write love poetry. It's a story that the citizens of Weimar love telling because it's part of their heritage, it's part of their culture. Hitler, when he comes to power, loves what Weimar represents, because to him, Weimar represents, the city of Weimar at least, represents German cultural supremacy, right? Germany produces the great poets, the great artists of Europe, the great all of these things of Europe. He loves what Weimar represents. And he would often go and travel to Weimar when he became the Führer. And he would do the same tour that tourists do today, right? He would walk down the streets, he would get himself a schnitzel, and he'd walk up the hill, and he'd sit under the oak tree. And at the top of this hill, Hitler makes an observation. On the top of the hill, he stands, the city behind him. On the other side of this hill, there's this empty field, no farmland, no nothing. And in this empty field, Hitler decides to build the Buchenwald concentration camp. Now you might be asking, why? If he loves Weimar so much, why would he build a concentration camp right there, intentionally, right? Buchenwald is out of the ordinary because, if you know history of World War II, you'll know that most German concentration camps were actually not in Germany. They were in Poland. Buchenwald is unique in that regard, in that it's not only in Germany, it's in like the heartland of Germany. It is in like the cultural center of Germany. So why would you build this here? Because yes, Hitler loves what Weimar represents, but he hates Weimar. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? The government that he spent his entire career railing against is founded here. The type of person that in the Hitler lecture we said is not just not patriotic, literally not German. They live in Weimar. He loves what Weimar represents, but he hates what Weimar is. And so he wants to make Weimar dirty. The only way he knows how, by putting Jews there. Now, the thing is, and this goes back to the, sort of the difference between Hitler and Stalin that we've talked about a lot. This is not a logical thing to do. This is not something that helps the local economy. This is not something that increases tourism to Weimar. It's not something that helps productivity in Weimar. None of these things. This is not a logical response. This is an emotive response. This is policy making based on emotion. I think I mentioned this in the live lecture. An old professor of mine used to call this the politics of the gut. And if you wanted to relate it to something a little more modern, if you're a fan of old school Stephen Colbert, he had this idea that he came up with near the beginning of the show. He called it truthiness. Things that aren't true, nowhere near true, but they feel true, right? They're not true here. They're true in your gut. They feel true. It's emotive. It's irrational almost. And Hitler's decision to put Buchenwald in Weimar is an emotive, irrational decision, just like many other irrational decisions by Hitler. And what's fascinating is that the case study of Weimar is looked at by political scientists and sociologists, because if you're if you're a citizen of Weimar and there's a concentration camp like around the hill, literally, you can't pretend to not know what's going on, right? Because you can't deny the evidence. You can see it, right? Unlike any other city in Germany, the citizens of Weimar could see the atrocities that were being done in their name. So, how was it possible that these citizens of Weimar could keep this going, could keep this what's the right word here? This fiction that everything was okay while there was a concentration camp, quite literally, in their backyard? Well, the answer is not as satisfying as you might hope. Just a sec. Trying to multitask here. So Rusty is right-footed, Dunn is left-footed. So let's switch these guys. Yeah, that's kind of why I want to keep Dunn too, because Dunn is left-footed midfielder, which is hard to come by at this level. Box to box. But yeah, it's the story of the citizens of Weimar is fascinating, because how do you square this circle? So what the Allies do is, when they take the city, they march the entire town of Weimar to the local cinema and force them to watch an early draft of that movie that we saw at the end of the Eichmann show, if you did the extra credit. It was, again, we've flirted with this issue before, but it is one of the first instances of film being used not just as a trial tool, as an educational tool, but as I guess an educational tool, really, right? The question of this of the citizens of Weimar is really one of those questions that has puzzled anthropologists for years now. Sociologists for years now. Because, like, how do you explain this? How do you, like, explain this societal amnesia, for lack of a better word? That society in Weimar just chooses to disregard the atrocities happening on their doorstep. And, I wish I had an answer for you guys, but I don't. To this day, no one really does. The argument that is made is that these people just sort of learned to live with it, and not, in order to maintain their sanity, just pretend nothing was wrong. But, on a personal note, I find that to be a bit of a chicken shit answer. Like, I don't find that to be credible. I don't think that's an accurate portrayal of the complexity of how humans interpret things going on around them. Like, you mean to tell me that these people had a concentration camp in their backyard and they had no opinion on the matter at all, positive or negative? That they just went, oh yeah, that is there. I wonder how that got there. Like, I just find that line of thinking to be just completely bogus, for lack of a better word. It's not, I just don't find it credible. And it's been a pet peeve of mine for years now. Like on a more personal note. Yeah, that now for real, I'm out of history stories. All of my history stories, I feel like you guys know already. Because either I've mentioned them in class already or I just told them today. These are all things that like I had meant to say in class, but for whatever reason I did not. I told the famous story of Stalin and the tanks, the ones that you guys still have nightmares about. So I guess I'm just going to focus on this until I get another question. I'm not going to narrate just to keep talking, but yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. So if you guys have a final question, throw it in the chat and I'll answer it as soon as I see it. Okay. So we are playing York City today. York City's top of the league. So there's 7 points ahead of us. It is very unlikely that we will catch them, but it is impossible to catch them if we don't win today. Because 10 points gap is like miracle. You would need a miracle to catch them to him at first. So, wait, we will top the standings if we win here. Hold up. Pause. Go back. Did York lose a bunch of games from like the last time I saw them? How do I go back? Rematch, pep talk. All right, let me just do the pep talk real quick, and then as soon as it's done, I'll go back. Somebody's not letting me forward. Assertive. We owe York what happened from what happened in their last match. Yeah, they won 3-0 in their last match, so I would like some payback. Kickoff. Okay, let's have a look at York City's form. Holy crap. We've played 3 games, well, 2 games this stream, and we won both of them, and they drew both of them, which means, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, they're 3 points ahead of us, but we have an extra game on them too. So, because they've played 26 games and we've only played 25. Huh. There is hope after all. We might be able to win this, which would make me very, very happy. So here we go. Let's start. They're playing with 3 at the back. I'm noticing almost immediately, which we might struggle against. I put Heslop in instead of Dunn because it's a little more defensive. In fact, let me put in deep line playmaker on defend just to make sure he stays back a little more. I want us to cover in this game. I want to push the ball forward. I don't want to play on the defense necessarily, but I also don't want to concede because last time I played very offensively and they scored 3, and I'm not doing that again because that was embarrassing. No chats? No chats. Okay. Let's talk about let's talk about things you should be reading, watching, listening to, YouTube channels, etc. I like to do this towards the end of the semester. I usually do this in the last class, but we won't have a chance to do that necessarily. I like to give students I guess for lack of a better word, a list of like podcasts you should be listening to and YouTube channels who you should be following because they're great. And movies that if you haven't watched this year, what are you doing? We actually watched quite a few of these, the movies I was gonna recommend in this class for the extra credit because of the COVID situation. A lot of the movie recommendations that I was gonna recommend, we actually got to watch. And so I guess we're gonna start with those. Based on the feedback that I got from the extra credit students, if you're watching this and you did not complete the extra credit assignment, but you're looking for something good to watch, by and large, students seem to tell me, based on the feedback that I got, that this little movie called The Eichmann Show on Netflix was a must-watch. It's very sad. Don't watch it first thing in the morning. But based on the feedback that I got, if you're looking for something to watch on Netflix tonight, The Eichmann Show is very good. I also understand that maybe for some of you at least, there's a lot of maybe Eichmann fatigue. between the class and the book. I'm sure maybe some of you are Eichmann out, but this is also like one of the most interesting legal and ethical dilemmas of the past century, right? Um, do we have justice systems that can survive the worst people, even if that person is a unrepentant Nazi? Um, the Eichmann case is a fascinating one. And the Eichmann Show is a movie about those producers that we talked about right at the end of the lecture, right? We talked about how the trial is filmed, how the trial is distributed all over the world. Chances are, if your grandparents learned about the Eichmann trial, they learned about it from television, not from like the news or from textbook, which is I find that to be crazy. It would be like, I guess the equivalent would be like, imagine learning about 9/11 12 years later because of a documentary series that airs on CNN, and they just scored, but it's offside, and so I can breathe a sigh of relief. Although that got way too close for comfort. We have had one shot, not one shot on target. Well, it is on target, but we've had one shot, and that's not okay. Like, we need to be doing better. Anyway, yes, high praise for the Eichmann Show. If you need something on Netflix. If you wanted something more entertaining, students also responded rather well to The Death of Stalin, which is also currently on Netflix. I guess fair warning that The Death of Stalin is one of the funniest but also darkest movies I've seen in recent history. It is it's a black comedy, and it's made by the guy who made Veep, Armando Iannucci. So I guess bear that in mind, bear that context in mind when watching it. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, it's free. High recommend though. It's very funny. If you need it, it's some tough times. If you need a laugh, like that's good for a laugh. Students really responded to that as well. I also had some pretty solid recommends for 1917, which is not on Netflix, and so you may need to either wait for that to come out or wait for it to come out or buy it on VOD. But if you're into war movies, I had a couple students that were really into war movies that really enjoyed it. They said it was really well done, and I happen to agree with them, even though I'm not a big fan of war movies. So that's sort of like three sort of solid historical films. However, I also understand that many of you may be historied out after the end of this class, and that's who this. Oh, so leave me alone. Did they just score that? Did they score with my back turned? They did score with my back turned. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Mistake too, right? Yep. Stole the guy from middle, and they just runs. Wow. We just let him. That's embarrassing. That's not good. Okay. I need a rethink here. Here's the thing. I am able to play this game fine if I'm winning and like multiple. But the minute I start losing, I lose my cool a little bit. I'm one of those people. So like now it has my full attention. But what was I saying? Movies. I cannot recommend Parasite enough. It's on Hulu currently, and that was one of the best movies I saw last year. And again, I want to say it's not a funny movie because it has its moments. I don't know how we would call it. Some of you know that I'm bilingual in Italian, and in Italian we have a term for this sort of movie, and that movie is tragicomedia, a film that is both a tragedy but also a comedy, and they're at the same time. It's not a black comedy necessarily, although it has it's that kind of humor. Like it's a drama, but it's also kind of funny. I guess like an equivalent would be for the couple of classes that were able to watch it. Think Amistad in terms of genre, but sans the cheese. You know, like it's a drama, but it's funny. Like it's like has its moments. How do we not score that? anyway, anyway, in terms of TV shows that I've been watching, um, it's not overly historical and historically accurate, but it's good fun. Um, the Last Kingdom on Netflix is it's sort of like a solid medieval romp, especially if you need something to scratch that post Game of Thrones itch. Um, the I think the thing about Last Kingdom is that the characters that are mentioned in the show, so people like King Alfred the Great, Guthrum, some of the more prominent Danish characters, King Canute, like these are real historical figures. Um, it is not the case that they act and behave the way they do in the show, although fair, it was like the 800 AD, 800 AD. So like, I can't guarantee that that's not how they behave, but like I'm 99% sure. But anyway, it's good fun. If you don't overthink it, it's a sort of like a solid show. So I need a pep talk here. What do I tell them? I'm just aggressively going to say that, hey, you need to show me something different in the second half because this has not been good. Some of these players are not happy. The player that seems demotivated is Alex Whittle, but yeah, Alex Whittle made the mistake that caused us the goal. So I'm going to harp on him at the end of the game, but it's fair saying, and I want to harp on Makengo though because he is not good either. Not happy with you. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play Route 1, which is not something I usually play in this game. But I have fast forwards who can chase loose balls, and I have enough creativity in the middle where I could take advantage of that. The idea is let's let's soak pressure and actually no, if I want to yeah no let's soak pressure as much as possible, and then when I get the break, now they could just wait me out. This is a risk that I'm taking, but I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work and it's like the 70th minute, I'm going to change something a little more offensive. I think that's a solid tactical plan. So let's go with that. Anyway, other TV shows that are worth watching. Not at all historical, but if you're interested in, I don't want to say philosophical dilemmas because that's giving it way too much credit. But I have been very into two similar shows, and those are Westworld and Devs on Westworld's on HBO, Devs is on Hulu, talking about similar things, discussing sort of similar uh, ethical questions, but yeah, both pretty solid. You can't go wrong. Um, in terms of like YouTube channel, which I recognize, like myself included, is probably what like most of you watch. Um, and you need some new channels to subscribe to. I personally love the Internet Today guys. Just search Internet Today, and it's a new show about like imagine if the Philip DeFranco show were edgier and like a little funnier. It's definitely worth a watch, and you'll know immediately if it's your if it's your cup of tea or not. In terms of more educational content, we watched him in class, and I can't say enough about him. CGP Grey makes fantastic content. You should be subscribed to him like by default because
Now, he makes videos like once every 3-4 months, but they're very good, very educational, very informative. To the point that I feel comfortable using them in class. Um, if you're into more like long form documentary content, um, I very much enjoyed recently. I came across her channel somewhat recently. Um, Lindsay Ellis. She's a she does mainly theater criticism, but she has a 3-part documentary on the filming of the Hobbit trilogy and how like they messed up a lot of things, including New Zealand's economy. It's very, very good. It's a solid use of like an hour and a half. Um, if you need something to watch entertainment wise. Meanwhile, it is the 61st minute, and we have done nothing, nothing at all. We're just getting offside after offside after offside. We need something different. This is not working. So I'm going to pause this. And yeah, this has not worked. This has not worked at all. Don't know what to do. How do I tackle this? Okay, well, I'm thinking I need to lose a midfielder and gain a striker. And based on the scoreline and the average rating, it's looking like Heslop is going to be the one to go. So what we're going to do is I'm going to drop Jalasi in the midfield, even though he's not super well equipped for that. I'm going to play him as a roaming playmaker. So he goes through the middle, up and down the pitch, but in more of a playmaker role, whereas Arresti is going to play more box-to-box role, where he's instead trying to find space and play short 1-2s. Heslop is going to come off the pitch, and I am going to replace him with a striker. Which of the two? I'm going to have to go on form, and Knowles scored 2 last time. Also, Makengo and Mate are similar strikers, but Knowles offers me something different. And deep lying forward on the attack roll. Okay. Well, he's going to have to work. For now. For now, at least, this is what we're going to go with. And instead of going route 1, we're going to go with the system that we had before. So we're going to go with underlap, underlap, more direct passing, work the ball into the box, low crosses, run at the defense. And distribute quickly. Yeah, okay. This is what we want. Good. Watch how they score again, and I completely have to rethink everything. All right, so Carvalho is breaking. We still haven't done the tactical change yet, so I may have to change everything already. Heslop, nothing. Why would you shoot from there? See, it's good that I'm taking you. Anyway, podcasts. Podcast is a very. God, am I going to lose this game 3-0 too? You're going to beat me 3-0 home and away. Frustrating. Especially because, like, 2 mistakes from my defense. You just let him go. Just let him be. Anyway, podcasts you should be listening to. I am a big fan of Lore at the moment. Lore is like, imagine if you took a horror movie and you turned it into a podcast. That's what Lore would be. Lore is it's Aaron Mankey, who is a storyteller, and I think he has a show on Amazon Prime with the same name. He just takes these horror stories and he turns them into a podcast form. They're great for like my favorite thing with lore is like if you're when all of this is over and we're allowed to drive again, and you're ever driving at night, lore is like a fantastic list. Again, if you're just tuning in now, I am still taking questions for the final. So if you want to throw them in the chat while we wait for this game to finish, I am gonna close out after this game is done because I'm a sore loser and I don't want to keep playing this. Played 3 games in a row. Enough is enough. Anyway, yeah, if you have questions regarding the final, questions regarding content, shoot them in the chat. I have the chat open right here, and I will answer them as soon as I see them. Other podcasts that are worth listening to at the moment. You want something funny? Dear Hank and John is a podcast made by the 2 guys that make the Crash Course videos, the 2 brothers, John and Hank Green. It's very funny. Like if you need something like to brighten your day, especially now, it's hard to go wrong with that. And other good podcasts. What am I listening to that's good? Let me check my podcatcher. Hello Internet. How could I forget Hello Internet? So the same guy who makes the CGP Grey channel makes Hello Internet, which is a podcast form of that that channel. It's covering sort of similar things but in longer form. And of course, the 2 classics that every late 20s white boy will recommend to you, Serial and S-Town. Serial is the podcast that got everybody hooked, and it is that for a reason. I recommend that you start with season 3, actually, because Serial season 3 is one of the most anger-inducing yet best things I've listened to. And how do I even combat that, right? Like, of course, he scores a world-class goal like that, where he just gets past his man. Does he chip the keeper too? No, he doesn't chip the keeper. Okay, then I would just rage quit at that point. But yeah, not happy. Not happy at all. Anyway, yeah, and S-Town is a story of this eccentric man that lives in rural Alabama, and you should definitely give it a listen. And okay, at least we got a consolation goal. At least there's that. Anyway, I apologize for this. Last game was boring. This was just embarrassing. So yeah. Anyway, do like to point out that Makengo scored again. Yeah, not to harp on my solid transfer policy, but solid transfer policy. Anyway, what music have I been listening to? That might be music you should be adding to your Apple your Apple Music or your Spotify. I've been listening to this this group called Judah and the Lion. Why Did You Run? It's a bit of an earworm. I rather like it. Pretty good. I'm personally a big Black Keys fan. If you're into rock music, in terms of like other genres, EDM, I've been listening to the usuals like Calvin Harris, Knife Party is really good. Yeah, I'm sort of running out of talking points here, but yeah, like these are my usual end of semester recommends. Could have made it 3-2. We could have at least made it interesting here. Anyway, we're sort of wrapping it up. It's looking like it's going to end 3-1, which is a shame, but it is what it is. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Let me double check that. But like I'm fairly sure I didn't see any more. Nope, no more chats. So I guess while we wrap this up, because there's one more minute of game left. A couple of you guys have emailed me with some personal stuff, letting me know that you guys are struggling, that your families are struggling, that you're health-wise, financial-wise, and not a lot that I can tell you that will make it better. The only thing that I can say is that I hear you, and I'm trying to be as flexible as possible to make this as easy as possible. I know that this is tough. I know this is hard. And I know that a lot of you guys are struggling physically and mentally as well. I get it. I'm there with you. But I'll sort of wrap this office hours up with the same thing that I said way back when I first, got on the YouTube live with you guys and started talking. And that I'm firm in my belief that this will get better, and that overall we will be fine, and that we'll get through this. All right, that you will get through this, and you need to believe that too. So I hope that cheers you up, that you feel better. It's looking like things are improving. My rule of thumb is, based on what my family's been telling me back home, is that we're about 2 weeks behind where they are, and they have, they're really making good strides to beat this. If I had to take a stab at when we might be able to finally go out, I'm thinking maybe another month, maybe another 3 weeks, and we should be okay. We should be okay. I hope so. I hope you guys are doing okay. Hope you guys are getting through this. I know a couple of you guys are working long hours to help your families, and I guess I have a lot of respect for you for doing that. It takes a lot to put your education on the line to help feed your family, and mad respect completely. Absolutely, and I know a lot of you guys are doing that. And so if there's a way for me to make this flexible for you, make this easier for you, please email me. If you're struggling, even after this class is over, you have my email. Please email me. I'll refer you to resources that the college has for you, whether that is whether you're having food security. College has a food bank that is still open and still available to you all. They have counseling facilities that are open and available to you all still, in spite of the pandemic, that you guys can use and you should use. There's no harm in it, right? You're paying for this stuff through your tuition. There's no shame in using this stuff if you need it. Asking for help is not a crime, and if you need it, use it. Don't kill yourselves trying to juggle everything, especially not for this class, because grand scheme of things, this class is not that important. Okay, so I think on that note, on this poor result, for which I apologize for, and I will yell at the players for you, it was unacceptable that you couldn't grab the win today to take us top of the table. Completely unacceptable, completely unforgivable. Anyway, I think that's it. I think I'll call it a day here. Again, if you guys have a good evening. I will maybe see you guys either Sunday night or between Sunday night and Tuesday night. One of those nights, maybe even more than once, depending on the influx of questions I get via email, basically. If I get 20 more emails with questions on the final, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to have another one of these answering questions. And if I don't, if things are relaxed, I'll maybe just do the one Tuesday night, sort of wrapping things up. Okay? For Monday, please, I know you got a lot on your plate. Please read the Slavenka Drakulich reading. And of all of the readings in the class, even the books, the Slavenka Drakulich reading is one of the most interesting and most beautiful things that you'll read in this class. both like on a human level. Give it a read, please. Like, just I would consider it a personal favorite. Okay. All right, guys. You have a good evening. Have a good dinner. Take it easy, everybody. Bye.